Fat doesn't spike blood sugar. Well, you've heard that 100 times. And it's technically true. But does it spike it and doesn't drive it up? Those are two totally different claims. And not all fat behaves the same way. There's a molecular reason one type of fat is a much bigger problem than the other. I have put this video together to show you exactly why.
Fat has almost no direct effect on blood glucose the way carbohydrate does. That part of the popular claim is correct. Eat a spoonful of any fat, plant or animal, and your glucose monitor barely moves. That's exactly why fat gets treated as a free pass in a lot of low-carb messaging. But blood sugar isn't only about what happens in the next hour. It's about whether your cells can respond to insulin at all. And that's where the type of fat starts to matter enormously.
A landmark European trial called the KANWU study, published in Diabetologia in 2001, put this to the test directly. Researchers had healthy adults replace saturated fat with monounsaturated fat without changing total fat or calories, and measured insulin sensitivity before and after. The group on more monounsaturated plant-derived fat showed improved insulin sensitivity. The group that stayed higher in saturated fat did not see the same improvement, and the effect was strongest when total fat intake was lower overall.
Ceramide buildup isn't the only way saturated fat may affect insulin sensitivity. Researchers have also studied another possible pathway involving inflammation. Some studies suggest that diets high in saturated fat may activate parts of the body's immune response, including a receptor known as toll-like receptor 4, or TLR4. This receptor normally helps the body recognize certain bacterial components. When this inflammatory pathway becomes more active, it may contribute to changes in cellular signaling that are associated with reduced insulin sensitivity. While scientists continue to study the exact mechanisms, inflammation is considered one of several factors that may play a role in insulin resistance. Some research groups studying TLR4 deficient models found that removing this receptor protected against fat-induced insulin resistance even on a high-fat diet, supporting the idea that this inflammatory route isn't just correlational, it appears to be mechanistically necessary in at least some of these models. That means saturated fat isn't working against insulin sensitivity through one channel. It's working through at least two simultaneously. The ceramide pathway directly jamming the signal inside muscle and liver cells, and this inflammatory pathway adding a second layer of interference from the outside. Unsaturated, plant-derived fats don't trigger TLR4 anywhere near as strongly, which is part of why the KANWU results held up the way they did. The intervention wasn't just changing one variable, it was removing fuel from two separate mechanisms at once. When comparing foods, it's helpful to look beyond simple labels. Two foods can both come from plants and still have very different nutritional characteristics. Coconut oil and palm oil are good examples of that. Looking at the overall nutrient profile often provides a more complete picture than focusing only on where a food comes from. Isn't saturated fat natural? People have eaten animal fat for generations. How bad can it really be? Good question. And it's worth breaking into two parts. First, natural doesn't automatically mean neutral for your body. Lots of naturally occurring foods affect us in ways worth understanding. People have always eaten it tells us about history, not about what's happening inside the body today. Second, and this is the more important point, the amount of saturated fat in a traditional diet and the amount in a modern diet usually aren't comparable. Traditional eating patterns tended to include less total fat overall, more fiber, and far less concentrated added fat. A portion of meat eaten occasionally, as part of a mostly plant-based, high-fiber diet, is simply a different experience for your body than that same fat eaten daily in large amounts alongside a low-fiber, heavily processed diet. So this isn't about calling saturated fat some modern invented toxin. It's about recognizing that dose, frequency, and what else is on your plate all shape how your body responds to it. That idea lines up with what we see across different cultures. Health outcomes vary widely even among populations that traditionally eat some animal fat. The pattern that tracks most consistently with better outcomes isn't the presence or absence of one food, it's the overall dietary pattern.
So no, fat doesn't spike your monitor, but that was never the right question. The right question is whether the fat on your plate is building ceramides that jam your insulin signal, or whole food fat that isn't concentrated enough to do that in the first place. That distinction is part of what took my own insulin from 83 units a day down to 35. If you're interested in more information, click the link below. That's not managing your diabetes, that's dominating it.